Hi and welcome. Good morning. My name is Jennifer Britton. I am the author of Effective Virtual Conversations, PlanDoTrack, and this is the first of several calls this week. It is March the 16th, 2020, and I wanted to host a series of what I'm calling virtual lunch and learns. As we all know, over the last few days and even months, the world is changing. So many people today are being asked to work from home, work remote, and as an author, as a practitioner in this space, I thought it would be really important to do a series of calls for people to access on how can you do your best work when working remote. I thought it would be interesting to answer some conversations and to also have people join in. We've got people live, and I'm just going to let people in as they come in. Welcome to you, Susan. Hi, I'm Jennifer. We're recording today's call, so I hope you're okay with that. Would you like to say anything as we get going today?
No, just excited to be here.
Good. Well, welcome. I don't know how many we'll have. I just literally called this call and wanted to really direct people to resources around things that you can be pulling on as you move into your world. Now, Susan, do you normally work remote yourself?
Yeah, I normally do. And it's interesting because I was going to be running some workshops with the 5 behaviors in person, which I'm hoping I want to convert them to virtual. And obviously now I think there are quite a few opportunities to be helping some of my, one-on-one clients to work with their teams virtually.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the intent of these calls. I'm actually going to be doing a call every day this week, either at 12 or 1 p.m. Just quick, short 20-minute calls. So whether you're coming at it from your lens of like, I'm a coach, I want to transition over, or maybe there are some people listening in are leaders. I do a lot of work with leaders that this morning they've been told our offices are closing, you are now going virtual. So how do you do that? And so as an author, I
Yes.
wanted to really direct people to like a slew of resources that I've created, not just in the last few months, but several years, almost the last decade. And so there is a whole website dedicated for those of you over at Effective Virtual Conversations that are actually moving your conversations, whether it's training, team development, over to the remote space. And so check that out. Every Monday, actually, I do an Effective Virtual Conversations tip. So this morning's tip, which is posted over at potentialsrealized.com, was all about boundaries. Because one thing we know about work in the remote space is you can keep on working. And I think, although that might not be people's concern today, in this, I think as the next few weeks unroll, like really helping people be at the top of their game so that there are some boundaries around how do we work. So what's your biggest question this morning? Is it really about how do I transition over? What platforms do I use? What are you thinking about today, Susan?
Yeah, actually I've taken, it's been a couple years, but you did a lot of like team or group coaching, and I've taken some of your stuff, but it's been years ago because I've been a coach for about 15 years. So it was so exciting when I saw your ICF thing come across. I'm like, oh yeah, I really like her. I remember I took some classes. So I was thinking, yeah, I was just curious, I think boundaries is going to be fantastic on a lot of fronts. But my question too is, so when you're running, let's say a workshop, do you do it by yourself, like with Zoom? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
is it challenging?
Yeah, well, that's a whole great question. I want to acknowledge we've got Ingrid in the room as well. So welcome to you, Ingrid. Thanks for joining us on the first of many. Just, I have a little bit planned, but like also taking your questions. So Susan's question is great. Like, what do we do? And I think, as we develop efficiency, I'm glad that you were sort of saying like, what platforms do we use? And we have a whole slew of platforms. But I think if you want to make it interactive and live and use breakouts and polls, Zoom is probably one of your best choices right now. So as you develop that musculature around how do I facilitate and maybe coach and do the technology, we do want to have, some practice. And Ingrid might have some comments on that. So I'll turn to Ingrid in just a moment, but I think Zoom is a great one. I actually do an ICF CCE approved program called Virtual Facilitation Essentials. It has always been offered as a 5-week program. Because of the urgency right now, I'm now delivering it and have been for the last few weeks as a 1-day program.
Okay.
And so, yeah, stay tuned. Next one is coming up March the 25th, next week, Wednesday, and there's still openings.
Good. Oh,
And then we've
good.
got Ingrid. Hey, Ingrid, how are you doing today?
Good.
Good.
I'm on the West Coast.
We're recording, so just so you know, if you don't want to be seen,
Yeah, I just hid my video. I don't even know what I look like. I just was quickly drinking my coffee and I saw your email and I've been thinking about you because so I'm on the West Coast of Canada. I'm in Vancouver and I teach at UBC, which is a huge institution, and they announced at about 5:45 p.m. on Friday that we were going virtual for the rest of the term. So me and my colleagues are kind of scrambling to shift. So I've used Zoom quite a bit, and I've taken a number of Jennifer's workshops and sessions, but I haven't used it for a class of 224 students, running cases in an interactive fashion. So that's my thing right now that I'm excited about, actually. And yeah, it's a great platform. It's very flexible. Jennifer, my UBC wants to use Collaborate Ultra. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, well, I haven't, and I'll just acknowledge we've got 512 dropping in as well. Welcome to you. We are recording. So just before I go to answer Ingrid's calls, any comments? Do you want to introduce yourself as you dropped in and maybe let us know what you want out of today's quick touch base?
Hey Jennifer, it's Katie Smith. I just wanted to be on the call. I don't have anything for just
All right. Well, welcome to you, Katie. I think everyone is hungry for connection, which is so important. So Ingrid had a great question of like, have I used? Was it which one was it? Elaborate? Was it Articulate?
Collaborate Ultra.
Okay, Collaborate Ultra. Cool. I haven't, but you know, I'm imagining with like a lot of the larger platforms, of course, it's like, you know, how do you connect hundreds of people? And there may be like a SCORM compliance on it in terms of like being able to notify or like identify who is actually logging in, because you're probably taking attendance and all of those things, which on a Zoom call, it's not really set up. It's more set up for conversation than for actually, you know, noting what students are in the room. But, have you checked out, Ingrid, maybe the tutorials and templates that are available?
Yeah, I'm going to start.
I think a lot of these platforms have great, you know, great options there in terms of video tutorials. But the key thing, and I pulled this like quote from Effective Virtual Conversations, it's when we have the trust, connection, and safety present that we're able to move into the most important conversations for the moment. And I think that's so true right now. Like people are having a range of emotions. I know Friday was like a tsunami, like change. And this morning it's continuing all over North America. And I would say probably all over the world as borders are also getting closed. So how do we, as coaches as well, hold the space for that range of emotions? What do we need in order to be present? And what do we need as well on a business level to keep things moving? So Katie, I'm glad you dropped in. You know, anything that you wanna indicate beyond just saying you're here? We've got Elizabeth Ashay joining us as well. Welcome to you, Elizabeth. Great that everyone's sort of dropping in this morning. So Katie, any comments for you before I turn to just welcome Elizabeth?
Oh no, I know that that this is going to be a big push for a lot of companies. I mean, it's going to really change the landscape, all this stuff. And so I just want to see what resources are out there, because I have client companies that could use those resources, and see what questions people are asking.
Absolutely.
Educate myself.
Well, good. Well, I'm going to say hi to Elizabeth. Welcome to you, Elizabeth. We're recording this call, just so you know. Did you come with any particular questions I can weave into our quick conversation this morning? Elizabeth's just listening in. So with that, I'm going to say, here's some resources that I want to point you to, and again, invite you to really point it to your clients. I've been developing a whole series of resources around the remote pathways umbrella in the last couple of months with a fellow colleague, Michelle Mullins. It's not only a podcast, but there's a whole slew of resources for remote teams and organizations that are going. Over at the Teams 365 blog, which some of you know, that's my main company, potentialsrealized.com. I've got about 4 or 5 years of weekly tips on effective virtual conversations. So you can actually go into the website and do a search for different topics. Let's say you're looking for, how do I run effective virtual meetings? You can put that in at the top of the bar here, on potentialsrealized.com. Now, something that's new, and if you haven't downloaded a copy, definitely grab a copy for you, point your clients there. A few weeks ago, I finished a remote working white paper, and when you need to get up to speed quickly, I didn't realize that this tsunami was really coming, but it goes into some of the remote enablers, what teams and organizations need. I frame those out as the 7 C's, so communication, clarity, connection, strong team culture, consistency, community, and really there's a lot of other practical things. So this is a white paper that is a practitioner lens. It's less research focused, more about how do teams and organizations get up to speed quickly. And that is found, let me see if I have the link here. That is found, I think probably the fastest place to find it, again, take you back to potentialsrealized.com. At the homepage, I've put a copy of it on the upper right-hand corner, and it looks like this, remote working white paper. So definitely circulate that. It's a good entry point because I think many of your clients will be looking at how do we keep things going, not per se maybe in the next couple of weeks, but like by April, May, like what will the work landscape look like? We don't know. We really, really don't know. So teamwork and disruption, it's a topic I've been writing about for many years. Again, my own background was with the United Nations. Well, often my teams were brought in post-disaster management. That was the environment that I led in throughout the 1990s and early 2000s. And I was saying a few weeks ago, like as we lead teams in disruption, there really is sort of this tension between strategic thinking and also agile thinking. So one of the things that you might be considering to do is really keeping an eye on vision. Like how can you help your teams create strong vision, get really clear on their agreements as they shift over, and how can they lean into strengths? Ultimately, I think we want to return back to the basics. And for someone who wants to go a little bit more into that, I did develop a mini course about 6 months ago called 5 Things New Remote Workers Need. This is over at the Teams 365 Teachable portal, and I've just done a 50% reduction. So it's like $50, but it'll give people just an initial starting point if they need to go on demand. Ultimately, though, resources, I think this is where books, why I'm an author, you know, books travel further. And so you've got either PlanDoTrack or Effective Virtual Conversations. And so you can pick up copies of these at Amazon. I did grab a couple of questions because I know some of you have come with like the question of, from a conversational lens, how do I connect? What do I use? And I would say always go to the lowest common denominator to start. You may need to be building up skills in the remote virtual space, and then also look at like what are the platforms available internal to an organization. And if those aren't really working from a conversational standpoint, if you are an ICF member, just a really good reminder that Zoom has an annual member discount or a benefit for ICF members. And so like I typically use, I have the Pro account. I can activate breakouts, polls, and annotation function, which really makes it more of a conversation, which is what we'll move into in just a moment to see if anyone has additional questions. So I think today, like there's an immediate question on connection. For many teams and leaders out there, it's like, what do I need to do? What do I do all of a sudden? Now my team is in 10 different locations instead of us being on the same floor. How do we connect? And I think going back to these 7 C's that are in the white paper will be so critical. How do we continue communicating? And that hopefully is not just text and email, but also voice. Because as we know, in periods of crisis and disruption, we want to be heard. Our team members do want to be heard. So with that, I'm going to come out of this. Again, lots of resources. I've also set up for anyone who's interested calls throughout this week. I'm earmarking this 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern block. I was supposed to be on holidays this week, but obviously we are not going anywhere. We are doing a staycation at home because I have an 84 and an 85-year-old parent that I cannot get exposed to as much as is going on. With that, I am doing 2 calls a day starting this week. If anyone wants like just a drop in one-on-one, ask me anything. We won't do the 12:20 today, but I'll have a call time at 12:40 if anyone wants to hit over to that link, bit.ly.com, Jen B with 2 N's, Jen B. March 2020. Grab a space on my calendar this week or next for a one-on-one, no cost, just it's my way to serve our community as well. So lots of you here. I'm so excited. I'm going to actually stop this share just so we can maybe see each other. If you don't have to put on your camera, but just to recognize that so many of you have made some time in your schedule to be here. We heard some great questions early on from Susan and Ingrid. And I'm just curious if there are any other questions that some of you have brought in terms of how do you support clients or anything else. So Susan, you'd had a good one. Any new ideas or any thoughts that you really want to get some ideas around? Because I think from the names here, we've got some really good practitioners who work a lot in the virtual space.
Yeah, and I guess yeah, I mean, I think trying to create things for me in particular, because I'm thinking about for my clients, if I work with a lot of managers and or senior level people, they're probably in the same situation as I am, where I logged on to you being more of the expert, and clearly as coaches, we're trained to work with our clients virtually. That's a part of training. So I think being able to provide forums for questions is fantastic. What other, and information and resources that we have, what other ideas might you have in terms of things we could offer to clients that probably would be beneficial now?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, depending on when people are listening to this, like I think there's the immediate, like how do we keep businesses running? And so that might entail, again, like from a team level, hosting team conversations, helping them remember about their agreements and look at revisiting their agreements. There may be a role for anyone, not just coaches, but around strategic planning and what is our business continuity plan. Again, I did a lot of work just after 9/11 throughout the Caribbean, where, again, because tourism was impacted similarly to what is happening now with small scale business. And in those years, so much of the conversations around business continuity. What do I need to do to keep the doors open? And so I think that is, of course, a very valid, very important concern right now. Some of you may have been doing more leadership coaching than entrepreneurial coaching, but I think entrepreneurism is going to be very important for large business. How do we keep the doors open? How do we innovate in a very tight cycle as well? Now, beyond that, how do we also keep programming running? And many organizations are committed. They may be scaling back, certainly, but they may also be looking at how do we ensure that conversations are happening virtually. So a lot of offsites or on-site work may be transitioned right over to Zoom. With that, as a resource for me, go over to YouTube and you can just Google my name, Jennifer J. Britton. There's a whole playlist on effective virtual conversations. Actually, there are 36 calls that I've done over the last 3 years, one a month, to help people think about how do you transition over your in-person training into the virtual space. And that's really where effective virtual conversations comes in. So it goes into some of the neuroscience. It also goes into some of the very practical tips. And I think if you've been coaching groups and teams, it's the simple things like less is more. Really think about how you're priming people for the conversation. Is there stuff that can be done before people get on the call? So those are just some like initial things. You're giving me some ideas though, because I've earmarked this 12 o'clock noon time frame for the next couple of days. So maybe I'll come tomorrow, Tuesday, with a bit of a teach piece around some of the neuroscience or some of the design tips for virtual. How can we have better conversations? And what are some of those quick hits? Do you think, Susan, in your work, that would be a useful use of your time if you're able to drop back in or at least listen?
Yes, that would be really helpful.
Fantastic. Well, we've got even more people dropping in. I want to acknowledge Nancy. Welcome to you. We've got a bunch of people on the line already. And given that we're here for a little bit, any other questions that I can answer today or earmark for questions to go forward? We've heard from Ingrid. Anyone else?
Jennifer, just it's Ingrid. Just thinking about what you were just saying, one of the things that I'm starting to get really clear on is that there's advantages to the virtual space that I don't have face to face, but there's also limitations. And I'm really starting to learn that it's such a different environment that I'm actually, it sounds that weird, but I'm kind of excited about the opportunity to shift something that I've always done face to face to online, but I know I need to be thinking about it differently. So it's not just a matter of moving it, it's a matter of really redesigning it and leveraging the strengths of that, the virtual space. And that's the part that gets me really excited. It's like it's a whole other dimension.
Yeah. It is, and you know, to Ingrid's point around design, it really is a redesign, and it's a thinking about how do we have these conversations differently, because we don't want to just be talking at people. We, you know, especially in the next few weeks, probably a lot of workplaces are going to be completely remote. So how do we have those important conversations that we need to have while maintaining trust and connection? Because when we don't see each other at the water cooler, quote unquote, it really is, we need to go the extra mile to like do the outreach, be proactive. If we lead, have those conversations, even if we don't know what we're going to talk about, it's just simply being there to be listening into the conversation as well. So Ingrid, any tips? Like, you've been making this shift for several months now. So are there any things that you've noticed that have helped the groups and teams that you work with have better conversations in the virtual space?
Well, a lot of your wisdom. One of the things that I definitely do with workshops is get people participating early and regularly. I use breakouts now a lot. The other thing, I guess I was just thinking one of the things you said to me at one point is that anything we do in the virtual space is sort of amplified, the good and the bad. So really recognizing that we have the potential to amplify some really good opportunities, but we need to also notice, like, the disconnect, I think, is the biggest thing, and making sure people feel connected. And I would also say the last thing is creating space for that connection and not putting too much content into a session.
And that's such a great, you know, quick tips. They're very small, but to Ingrid's point, like the amplification factor in the remote space, it's the little things that move the needle forward, but it's the little things that also totally erode trust. And as we know, in any organizational context, trust is essential, especially in moments of time where things are changing rapidly, dramatically, where people are off balance, which is really this moment in time. So we do what we can, and as coaches, as leaders, we want to make sure that we're leaving the space, even if we don't have the answers, right? And I think that's something that I hope to be modeling this week as well, right? Like, I'm ahead of the curve from some, but I still don't have all the answers in how do we have great conversations in the virtual space. So I hope that if you have time, if you have 20, 25 minutes in the next few days, drop back in, or even send me your questions, because I'm committed throughout this entire week to be here. Again, I was supposed to be on the road, but we are home based, and I really wanted to give back. So it's good to see names here. Before we wrap up with this component, any other questions, burning questions that people have?
I'm just, first of all, I'm so excited to finally see your face. I have most of your books, but I literally just got a text from a client. He owns a law firm, like half an hour ago, going, "We're moving online. Carolyn, what tips and tricks can you give me?" He attended his first Zoom call with me a week ago, so he's like totally green. So I'm like, "Yeah, give me some time. I'll send you some templates." And I'm going to send that. If it's okay, I'm going to send your white paper that, I literally, I'll show you right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to send your white paper, but look.
You got a copy, good.
But I'm just looking, I'll send your YouTube link. Like, I'm just looking for any templates. Like, I'm not a template person, but I value them. So what do you suggest?
Again, little tip, because you're here, effective virtual conversations, like I do in almost every book, buried on page X, okay, right here, you'll notice, as I've done with other books, there are downloadable templates, okay? So you can head on over. The website for this book, of course, is Effective Virtual Conversations. And there are downloadable templates and resources. Use code 2424 as you go over to Effective Virtual Conversations. So for like a team, maybe they need a virtual team meeting template. There are 2 or 3 templates for each of the chapters. So in this book, it's not just about how do you do a webinar. It is about the whole ecosystem of virtual. And there are pieces on design, like in today's call, we've talked about design. So there's a whole chapter on design for the remote space. There's a piece on neuroscience. There's like preparing for blast off. How do you get prepared? And a lot of our clients right now are going to have to step into this very quickly. So there are checklists as well. And there is a whole third of the book related to virtual teams and virtual leadership. And this is the segue. So like the segue, this was 2017, 2019, last year, I came out with PlanDoTrack. It's a workbook planner specifically for virtual and remote professionals. So it is a workbook, 120 pages of helping people really think through their strengths, all of these elements. And then the 2020 piece now is remotepathways.com. So I've got a podcast. We've been exploring the different pathways people find themselves in, whether they are a project manager, whether they're an entrepreneur, whether they're a leader. So, you know, everyone is listening to podcasts, and my co-host and I are actually like looking at the ones we had recorded in the last few weeks and like trying to push them forward, because I had just done one 3 weeks ago on how do you get up to speed quickly. So Carolyn, thank you. So glad that you joined us. Come on back. See some other people like Nancy. I want to say a hello to you, and I'm so glad you're here. You don't have to say anything, but it's good to see you as well.
Oh, lovely to see you too.
And so send me, you know, info@potentialsrealized.com. Even if you can't come back, send me your questions and I'll roll those in for the rest of this week. And please do take a moment, head on over to potentialsrealized.com, my main site, where you'll get links to all these other, like, what's the book? Every book pretty much has a related website, but potentialsrealized.com is the host. So with that, thank you. Maybe just share with us in chat. I'd love to just read out like people's learning or value from this quick 30 minutes that we've had together. You wouldn't mind just turning to chat right now and share with us what's one thing that you can take away and actually implement in your work or pass on to a client. I'd love to sort of hear what that implementable tool is, because even as I'm speaking, like hearing Ingrid's comments around augmentation, I know that I talk about that all the time, but I often forget about augmentation. That's a really key tip for our work. How are things getting magnified or not? So just take a moment if you can. For Susan, it was 7 C's for remote working. Great. And that's a whole new piece. This is like a whole new piece of content that's come out since last November, which is key. I think, you know, if we can focus on the community, the culture, the connection, the consistency, it's all about consistency of messaging, especially in times of disruption. And as I say that as someone who led through crisis, the first 15 years of my career, it was crisis after crisis. And this is a time of life right now. And I think we are all being called upon to lead in uncertainty. For Nancy, it was good to see you here. I'm glad that you'll be back tomorrow. And yeah, call will kick off every day this week, 12 noon Eastern, except for Friday. I was supposed to be working on Friday, so Friday I've got calls booked. I'll be here at 1 p.m. For Ingrid, her learning was keep an eye on vision, lean into strengths, redesign. And for Carolyn, I'm so glad you appreciate your tips. The tips and tricks we looked at, and also how to lead from uncertainty. So be well. If you'd like, doing a one-on-one this week. So grab a spot. And I talked a little bit about that earlier. I'll include it with the YouTube link. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jennifer. This was great. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. And there's more people entering in, so I'm going to just let them in. If you have to drop off, by all means, drop off. And I'm just going to say hi to you, Jacques. I'm glad that you could join us. We're just wrapping up our group part of the call. I'm going to stay on the line now for a few more minutes, but this call is going to be uploaded over to my YouTube channel. So for Elizabeth, no, we didn't get to hear from you. Jacques, are there any quick questions that I might be able to answer before I drop off the line? just on a 30-minute call. So thanks for dropping in. And this will go up to youtube.com, Effective Group Coach. All right.